Chapter 10. Hearing the Unspoken. There's a point, after enough loss, where the story stops being about what was taken and becomes about what remains. Not because the grief disappears. It doesn't. The missing parts never grow back. The scar on my neck still pulls when I turn too fast. There are nights when I wake and for a split second reach instinctively for a voice that isn't there, the old phantom limb of sound. But over time, the sharpness of that absence has been joined, if not softened, by something else, a kind of quiet knowing. Not that everything happens for a reason, just that everything, even the worst of it, leaves traces you can choose to shape into something more than rubble. When I look back, the story began long before anyone said the word cancer. It began in that little speech room with picture cards and mirrors, with a boy trying to force his tongue into patterns that never quite stuck. It ran through the seizure on the library floor, the antiseptic smell of neurology wards, the first time I realized my body could betray me without warning. It threaded itself through every classroom where I knew the answer and didn't raise my hand, every meeting where my idea arrived 2 beats too late, every social event where my mouth felt like a faulty tap. Losing my larynx was not a clean cut from a previously smooth life. It was another, brutal chapter in a long history of being reminded that control is a story we tell ourselves to get through the day. For years, I'd yoked my identity to the idea of voice. Not just the physical ability to make sound, but the social currency it represented. If I could just get this right, if I could just speak smoothly enough, loudly enough, in the right rhythm, I'd finally be valid. Finally counted. Finally human in the way the world recognized. Every stutter was a small failure. Every conversation that sprinted past me felt like proof that I was less. Epilepsy added another twist. Not only could my words betray me, my consciousness could too. In that context, finding my voice always felt less like a motivational slogan and more like a desperate scramble. Then came the static in my throat, the diagnosis, the sentence, the long goodbye, the architecture of silence built in its wake. At each step, something I'd clung to as proof of existence fell away. Fluent speech? Never had it. Reliable body? Seizures took that. Ragged, hard-won voice? Cancer cut it out. If identity was a Venn diagram of those things, what was left? For a while, after the surgery, it felt like the answer was not much. Sitting in hospital gowns, suction machine growling at my bedside, unable to call for help without a button, I felt more object than person, non-verbal, dependent, fragile. The world, even when kind, had a way of seeing the missing parts first. But in the months and years that followed, other layers started to show themselves. Some of them had been there all along. I'd just been too busy wrestling with speech to notice. The part of me that sat in waiting rooms and watched people's faces, fascinated by the little betrayals, a flicker of sarcasm, the pinch of fear, the quick, private smile. The part of me that heard rhythm in things that weren't words, the beeping of machines, the soft shuffle of nurses' shoes at 3 a.m., the uneven breath of someone crying in the next cubicle. The part of me that had always turned to writing when talking failed. That boy had scribbled in notebooks. That teenager had typed late at night. That man had stared at a blank document and filled it with everything he couldn't get past his teeth. After the laryngectomy, those parts didn't vanish. If anything, stripped of the constant labor of trying to be heard out loud, they stepped forward. My internal voice, clear, articulate, unbroken, had never depended on my throat. It lived elsewhere, in the wiring between memory and meaning, in the way images linked to sentences, feelings to phrases. Cancer had cut out a piece of tissue, not the part of me that noticed, named, wrestled, forgave. Realizing that was not a single epiphany. It was a series of small recognitions. Sitting with my brother, both of us watching the same sunset through my lounge room window, sky washed orange, then pink, then that deep blue that makes streetlights flicker on. He said, "Beautiful, hey?" I wrote, "Yeah." Then under it, "Like the sky is remembering how to be quiet before night starts shouting with crickets." He laughed, shook his head. "Only you would put it like that." I shrugged. My brain had always been doing that, turning things into lines, part observation, part poetry. The only difference now was where they landed, on paper, on screens, in the spaces between touches. Identity, I realized, was less about the medium and more about the pattern, the particular shape of how you move through the world, how you respond when things break, how you hold other people's fear, how you tell the truth to yourself, even when you can't get it out loud. The world, of course, doesn't always see it that way. It still loves it's loud. Campaigns still shout about using your voice. Rooms still reward whoever can fill them fastest. But on the edges where I live, I've seen another map. There's the young woman in the support group with a feeding tube and a notebook full of furious, funny essays. Her cheeks hollowed by treatment, but her eyes blazing when she passes pages around. There's the older man on my street who never speaks, whether by choice or condition, I don't know, but who brings everyone's bins in on windy days so they don't topple and spill. There's the kid at the bus stop who taps out entire conversations on his phone screen, showing them to his friends with a grin, unbothered by the extra seconds it takes. Their worth isn't conditional on their ability to project. It shows up in consistency, in stubbornness, in care. Being pushed into their company, into the margins where speech isn't king, has been one of the strangest gifts of all this. It's dismantled, piece by piece, the lie that volume equals value. There's power in speaking, I'll never deny that. I've sat in doctors' offices and felt how the right question, asked clearly and insistently, can change the course of treatment. I've watched activists on stages shift policy with razor-sharp words. But there's also power in how you listen, in how you hold silence, in how you choose, when handed a megaphone, to pass it to someone else who's never been given one. I don't get invited to panel discussions. I don't stand at podiums. My body announces my difference before I can say a word. Scar, stoma, silence. For a long time, I thought that meant my story would always be half told, trapped in my skull, half scribbled in notebooks. But the thing about stories is, they find ways out. They seep through whatever cracks you leave them. Mine has escaped in texts to friends late at night, in notes slid across cafe tables, in the slow, deliberate pages of this account. It's in the way I stand next to someone newly diagnosed and let them see, without a speech, that there is life after. Not the same life, not a heroic, glossy, triumphant life. A life where you still get irritated by traffic, still laugh when a meme nails your mood, still feel a small, unreasonable joy when you make a perfect cup of tea. I used to think the question was, how do I tell my story when I can no longer speak it aloud? Now it feels more like, how do I live it in a way that the story tells itself, even when I'm not explaining? In hospital corridors, you can tell who has given up and who hasn't long before anyone opens their mouth. It's in the way they meet your eyes, in whether they bother to smooth the blanket for the person in the next bed, in whether they ask the nurse how she's doing. Words can lie, habits don't. My identity is not my speech. It's in the grooves of how I move. The old fears still get loud sometimes. On a bad day, when the suction machine clogs, or a stranger stares too long, or someone says, "I can't imagine living like that," pity thick in their voice, I feel the old argument rise. You're less, you're broken, you have to work twice as hard to deserve half as much space. The internal echo answers more steadily now. You have already done more work to exist in this world than many people ever will. You owe no one a performance. Your being here is not a favor you're asking, it's a fact. Peace has not meant making friends with everything that's happened. I am not grateful for cancer. I am not grateful for epilepsy. I would take back the seizures, the biopsies, the cut throat in a heartbeat if I could. Peace has meant accepting that I can't and refusing to build the rest of my life around what's missing. It shows up in small ways, in saying no to events where I know I'll be treated like a prop, an inspirational interlude between louder acts, in saying yes to slow coffees with people who don't flinch when I pick up my pen instead of my voice, in letting myself feel joy without checking if I've earned it by being wise enough, brave enough, stoic enough about my losses. The beauty people talk about in quiet moments, it's not in the silence itself. Silence can be terrifying, oppressive, a place where bad thoughts echo. The beauty is in what gets revealed when the usual noise is stripped away. The look on Mum's face when she reads a line I've written and recognizes something she's felt but never named. The way my friend's shoulders drop when he sits next to me and realizes, consciously or not, that he doesn't have to make conversation here if he doesn't want to. The small, unremarkable, stunning fact of sitting alone in my flat on a Tuesday night, cup of tea hot in my hands, watching steam rise, knowing I nearly didn't make it to this ordinary moment. There was a time, not that long ago, when I would have filled that kind of quiet with radio, with scrolling, with background chatter. Now I let it be. Not always, but often enough. On those nights, the internal echo is still there, of course, narrating, commenting, reaching for lines. Sometimes I pick up the pen and give it ink. Sometimes I just listen. To the fridge hum, to the neighbors arguing faintly through the wall, to my own breath, soft through the doorway at my throat. That sound used to frighten me. It was a reminder of what had been cut, of what was missing. Now, on good nights, it's something else. Proof. In, out, in, out. A quiet insistence, you're still here. There's no neat lesson to end with, no final triumphant declaration, just this. I spent most of my life believing my worth lived in the words I could force into the air. When those words were taken, the thing that remained, the part of me that notices, that cares, that reaches, that refuses to look away, that was me. It always had been. The rest was just how other people heard it. You are hearing it now in this form, letters on a page, vibrations in someone else's voice, reading them aloud. However it reaches you, it was born in the same place my spoken words once were. A mind, stubborn and soft, trying to make sense of a body that will not behave. If there is anything I'd want you to take from all of this, it's not that losing your voice reveals some mystical truth. It's that identity, yours, mine, anyone's, was never only in the sound. It's in the choices you make when no one is watching, in the way you carry what you've lost, in the way you treat those whose voices the world doesn't know how to hear. The last thing I'll offer you isn't a sentence, it's a moment. Close your eyes, if you can. Listen to the small sounds closest to you, your own breath, a clock tick, distant traffic, the shift of fabric on skin. underneath all of that, there is a deeper quiet, not empty, full, of everything you've thought and never said aloud, of everyone you've been, even when no one was looking. That place, the one no cancer, no surgery, no diagnosis can cut out, that's where I live now, where I have always lived, where, for a lingering beat, you and I are sitting together in the same stillness, nothing spoken, everything understood.